Hello friends, today we are going to discuss what is the dynamic SQL in SQL Server. So let's begin to understand it. Here's a simple definition of the dynamic SQL. Dynamic SQL in SQL Server is a programming technique that allows the building the SQL query as a textual string and execute them dynamically at the runtime. In this point, basically, what we saying that we create a SQL query in the textual form, and we can modify this textual dynamically, and then we can execute it. It is making the SQL more flexible, as it is not hard coded. We can dynamically we can change the condition or dynamic SQL as the base of our requirement. There is no need to the hard coded SQL query again and again. And dynamic SQL can be executed using the SP execute SQL store processor or execute keyword. So the simple way, normally we use the execute keyword to execute the dynamic SQL. So next is a drawback. What is the basic drawback of the SQL Server? The basic drawback of the dynamic SQL is that while it is offering the flexibility and improved performance, it can be hard to debug. This is a drawback. It can be hard to debug, manage error, and it is vulnerable to the SQL injection. Second drawback is use of the dynamic SQL should be carefully considered, as it is can be introduced a security concern and make error management more difficult. It is more difficult error management because of the entire SQL query in a variable string variable. So it is difficult to manage the error and debugging it. So you can see in the practical way in the next slide. This is a simple definition of the dynamic SQL and what is the drawback of the dynamic SQL. So let's go to the SQL Server to see how it is working. Now we are in the SQL Server window. SQL Server window, I take just a simple example from the internet, not more complicated. In the industrial or the live scenario, we normally use very more complicated examples like dynamic SQL. You can see in the live scenario a paragraph, entire paragraph as a dynamic SQL. There is a certain multiple parameters need to be added and subtracted based on the condition. So here is a simple example I take from the internet. There is a table, employee table. Let's see how I am executing employee table. There is a 4 records, employee ID and employee name. So I assign the two variable I declare the two variable SQL. This is used for the dynamic SQL, and second is a employee ID. This is a conditional variable. So I assign the value to the condition variable employee ID, and this is this variable used for the dynamic SQL. In a dynamic SQL, there is a main query. We add modify our this query based on the condition variable. The condition variable value change according the requirement. So I will see the next live example. This is a simple example. I declare two variable. One variable is a condition variable, second variable for the dynamic SQL, and we write a query in a string form, textual form. You can see it, and assign the conditional variable and make the full SQL that need to be full and final that need to be executed. So next step, I execute this full and final SQL by using the execute key. You can execute on a second method, but normally simply we use the execute keyword to execute the dynamic variable. So I am executing these entire things. Let's see what happen. I comment this first line and I just execute entire. You can see this is the result. This is a result based on the condition, and this is very simple example. It can be more complicated according to the industrial live according to the live scenario. And you can see the what kind of the SQL made what kind of SQL made before execute it by using the statement. Just you want to see what the SQL made, final SQL made before executed. So just I type the print, and I want to see the what SQL final SQL made after adding the condition. So I execute this again, result will be same, and I want to see this final SQL statement. So you can see this is in the message box. This is the final SQL that is executed, and result will come this. So this is the final SQL. I copy it and I paste it here that you can see clearly. This is the final SQL before executed. So this is a simple example of the dynamic SQL. And in case of live scenario, I see you some more complicated. This is it is also a simple example, but some you can relate on the live scenario. For example, here there is a procedure report. We have the two variable flag and that condition. In condition variable comes the where condition and flag which query need to be executed. So we pass two variable from the application. Just assume that store procedure called from the application through the application. This procedure got the two parameter. One parameter is the condition, second parameter flag. On the basis of this flag, we execute the SQL. We prepared the dynamic SQL. So for the dynamic SQL, we declare a textual query declare a variable for the textual query. So we declare a SQL query as a worker max. So for example, there is a conditional. There's some value in the where condition, and based on that condition, we need to execute the dynamic SQL. So let's assume that the flag value is a 2. So first is this procedure check if the flag value 1 that not executed, then else if the flag value 2, the compiler comes to the this line, and this line it is created dynamic SQL. It is our main query. We add the dynamic condition value. Anything can be, it can be ID, anything depend on the table, and it is after this line it is prepare the final SQL on this variable in a textual form, and next step we execute this textual form query. We can also print that query that we can debug, we can understand what the final query made before the executed. So this is another example of the dynamic SQL. We create a dynamic query based on the condition and execute it. It is very simple, but in the live scenario you can see that the complicated, like a single large paragraph query. There is a here I add one variable. In a live scenario you can see the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 variables in a paragraph query. So this is a very useful and also a drawback. It is implemented on the based on the condition. In such a situation there is a need only dynamic SQL. We cannot handle this situation from the live queries. So I hope you understand what is the dynamic SQL, how it is looks on the SQL server, and how can we implement it. Thank you for watching this video.